fell softly on the ancient village, creating a rhythmic patter on the cobblestone streets. The evening air was thick with humidity, and a dense fog rolled in from the nearby forest, blanketing everything in a ghostly shroud. The houses, old and worn, stood silently, their wooden frames creaking with age. Among these relics stood an enigmatic house, larger and more ominous than the rest. Its once white exterior was now a decaying grey, and the windows, covered in grime, gave it an eerie, abandoned look. However, it was not the decrepit state of the house that drew attention. It was the windowless windows that seemed to lead to nowhere. Nako, a young woman in her late 20s, arrived in the village with her friend Hiroshi, a few years older and more skeptical of the paranormal. They had heard stories about the house from an old villager who claimed it was cursed. Nako, an amateur photographer, was intrigued by the tales and wanted to capture the essence of the mysterious house through her lens. Hiroshi, ever the rational thinker, accompanied her out of concern. As they approached the house, a chill ran down their spines. The house loomed over them, its presence almost tangible in the dense fog. Nako took a deep breath and stepped forward, her camera ready. Hiroshi followed closely, his eyes darting around, wary of any sign of danger. The front door creaked open with a push, revealing a dark and musty interior. The air inside was stale, and the wooden floorboards groaned under their weight. Nako switched on her flashlight, casting long shadows on the walls. The interior was a time capsule from the past, filled with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. Each room they explored seemed to tell a story of a bygone era. But there was an unsettling feeling that they were not alone. In the dim light, they noticed something peculiar. The windows, which from the outside seemed normal, albeit dirty, from the inside were blocked by solid walls. There was no view, no light coming through them. It was as if the house itself was hiding something. Nako took pictures of the bizarre windows, her excitement mixed with a growing sense of dread. Hiroshi, on the other hand, felt a mounting unease. As they moved deeper into the house, they came across a staircase leading to the second floor. Despite his reservations, Hiroshi followed Nako up the creaking steps. The upper floor was even more dilapidated, with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture scattered around. In one of the rooms, they found a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. Its surface was covered in a thick layer of dust, obscuring their reflections. Nako wiped the dust away, revealing their faces in the dim light. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, and the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath became visible in the frigid air. Hiroshi turned to leave, urging Nako to do the same. But she was entranced by the mirror. She felt a strange compulsion to stay, to uncover the secrets hidden within the house. Reluctantly, Hiroshi agreed to explore one last room before they left. They entered a small, narrow hallway that led to a door at the end. The door was slightly ajar, and a faint light flickered inside. Nako pushed the door open, revealing a small room with a single window. Unlike the others, this window was clear, and through it, they could see a beautiful garden bathed in moonlight. The sight was mesmerizing, almost too perfect to be real. Nako stepped closer to the window, drawn by the serene beauty of the garden. As she reached out to touch the glass, the light flickered again, and the image of the garden wavered. She blinked, and the garden was gone, replaced by a reflection of the room they were standing in. Startled, she stepped back, bumping into Hiroshi. He steadied her, his face pale with fear. They both realized that the house was playing tricks on them, showing them what it wanted them to see. Desperate to leave, they made their way back downstairs. But the house seemed to resist their departure. The walls groaned and the floorboards shifted, making every step a perilous journey. Just as they reached the front door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. They were trapped. Panic set in, and they frantically searched for another way out. In their haste, they stumbled upon a hidden door in the living room, partially concealed behind an old bookshelf. With no other options, they pushed the bookshelf aside and opened the door. revealing a dark staircase leading down into the basement. The basement was cold and damp, with a musty smell that made them gag. Their flashlights barely penetrated the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. As they descended, they heard faint whispers, indistinct and haunting. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with a sense of dread. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room was an old wooden table, and on it lay an ancient-looking book. The book was open, its pages filled with strange symbols and drawings. Nako reached out to touch it, but Hiroshi grabbed her hand, shaking his head. They both knew that whatever was in that book, it was the source of the house's malevolent power. Before they could leave, the whispers turned into screams. The room shook violently, and the walls seemed to close in on them. They fled up the stairs, barely escaping the collapsing basement. Back in the living room, they found the front door miraculously open. Without looking back, they ran out of the house and into the night, the screams echoing in their ears. The rain had stopped, and the fog had lifted, revealing a clear night sky. They didn't stop running until they reached the village square. Gasping for breath, in the safety of the village, they recounted their experience to the old villager, who had told them about the house. He listened intently, nodding as they described the windows and the mirror. When they finished, he told them that the house had a dark history. It was once owned by a wealthy family who practiced dark rituals, trying to open a gateway to another world. The windows to nowhere were a result of their failed attempts, trapping the spirits of those who had died in the house. The mirror was a portal, showing glimpses of the world they sought to enter. The garden they saw was a lure, meant to draw them in and trap them forever. Nako and Hiroshi were horrified. They had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. The old villager warned them never to return to the house, and to tell no one of their experience. The house was alive, and it fed on fear. Nako deleted the photos she had taken, vowing never to speak of the house again. But the memory of the windows to nowhere and the haunting whispers would stay with them forever, a reminder of the night they faced the unknown and survived. As they left the village, the house stood silently, its windows dark and foreboding. It would wait for its next victims, ready to show them the beauty of a garden that didn't exist, and trap them in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Nako and Hiroshi returned to their city lives, trying to bury the memories of that eerie night. However, the haunting experience in the house had left an indelible mark on their minds. Nako found herself drawn to the photographs she had taken before deleting them. The images burned into her memory. Hiroshi, on the other hand, became more protective and cautious, sensing a lingering threat. A few weeks after their return, Nako started experiencing strange occurrences in her apartment. At night, she would hear faint whispers, much like those in the house, and cold drafts would sweep through her rooms despite the windows being closed. Her curiosity and fear grew in equal measure, compelling her to investigate further. One evening, she decided to visit Hiroshi, hoping he could offer some solace or explanation. Hiroshi's apartment was a stark contrast to Nako's. It was meticulously organized, reflecting his logical and structured mind. However, even here, Nako couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. Hiroshi welcomed her in, and they sat down to discuss the unsettling events. Nako described the whispers and the cold drafts, her voice trembling slightly. Hiroshi listened intently, his expression serious. He admitted that he too had felt an inexplicable chill at times, and had seen shadows move in the corner of his eyes. The rational part of his mind dismissed these as tricks of the light or stress, but the experience in the house had shaken his confidence. Determined to find answers, they decided to research the history of the house and the family that once lived there. They hoped to uncover clues that could explain the bizarre phenomena following them. Their investigation led them to an old library in the city, known for its extensive archives on local history. The librarian, an elderly man with a keen interest in the supernatural, directed them to a dusty corner, filled with old newspapers and records. As they sifted through the yellowed pages, they discovered articles about the family who owned the house. The family, the Sato clan, was wealthy and influential in the early 20th century. However, rumors surrounded their sudden disappearance and the subsequent abandonment of their home. One article mentioned a daughter, Ayumi Sato, who was known to be a gifted painter. Her artwork was said to be mesmerizing, capturing the beauty of their garden in haunting detail. Intriguingly, it was reported that Ayumi began to change after a series of mysterious deaths in the family. Neighbors claimed she would talk to herself, her conversations seemingly directed at unseen entities. Her paintings became darker, depicting disturbing scenes that contrasted sharply with her earlier works. Nako and Hiroshi realized that Ayumi's paintings might hold the key to understanding the curse of the house. They learned that some of her works were stored in a small local museum. The next day, they visited the museum, which was quaint and unassuming, nestled in a quiet part of the city. The curator, a middle-aged woman with an air of secrecy, guided them to the section displaying Ayumi's paintings. The paintings were indeed beautiful, but carried an undercurrent of unease. Among them was a large canvas, depicting the garden they had seen through the window. Nako felt a shiver run down her spine as she recognized the scene. It was exactly as she remembered, down to the smallest detail. The curator noticed their interest and offered to show them Ayumi's diary, which had been donated along with her paintings. The diary was old, its pages brittle, and filled with elegant but erratic handwriting. As they read, they uncovered Ayumi's descent into madness. She wrote about voices calling to her from the mirrors and windows, promising eternal beauty and peace if she joined them. The diary entries became increasingly frantic, detailing her attempts to resist the lure of the otherworldly beings. Ayumi described how the windows and mirrors would show her different realities, tempting her to step through. She believed that her family's deaths were orchestrated by these entities, who wanted to claim their souls. The last entry was the most chilling. Ayumi wrote about a final ritual to seal the gateway and trap the malevolent spirits forever. However, she expressed doubt about its success, fearing the entities were too powerful. Nako and Hiroshi felt a growing sense of urgency. They realized that the malevolent force from the house was not just confined to its walls, it had followed them. Desperate to protect themselves, they decided to return to the house and complete the ritual Ayumi had described. Armed with the diary and their determination, they made their way back to the village. The journey was tense, filled with an unspoken fear of what awaited them. Upon arriving, they found the village shrouded in an eerie silence. The house stood as ominously as before, its windows still dark and foreboding. They steeled themselves and entered, the atmosphere inside even more oppressive than their last visit. Following the instructions in Ayumi's diary, they gathered the necessary items: candles, incense, and a small, intricately carved box that Ayumi had hidden in the house. They set up the ritual in the living room, where the presence felt strongest. As they began the ritual, the temperature dropped, and the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The house seemed to come alive, its walls closing in, as if trying to suffocate them. Nako chanted the incantations from the diary, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Hiroshi stood guard, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers turned into screams, and they felt a powerful force trying to break through. In the chairs, Hiroshi saw a shadowy figure emerging from one of the blocked windows. It reached out with ghostly hands, trying to pull them into the void. With a surge of determination, Nako completed the final chant, and the force subsided. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the candles reignited on their own. They had succeeded in sealing the gateway, but the ordeal had left them exhausted and shaken. They left the house for the last time, the weight of their experience heavy on their minds. Back in the village, the old villager, who had first told them about the house, awaited their return. He listened to their tale, nodding with understanding. He revealed that he was a descendant of the Sato family, tasked with watching over the house and ensuring the ritual was performed if needed. Nako and Hiroshi had fulfilled a duty that had been waiting for decades. As they departed the village, they felt a sense of closure. But the experience had changed them. They knew that the memory of the house and its haunting whispers would remain with them forever. They had faced the unknown and survived. But the shadow of the house would always be a part of their lives. The windows to nowhere were now sealed. But the fear and mystery of that night would never truly fade. With their mission complete, they hoped to move on and live their lives, free from the specter of the past. Yet, in the quiet moments, they would always remember the house and the unseen threat that had once nearly claimed them. The days following their return from the village were filled with an uneasy calm for Nako and Hiroshi. They tried to resume their normal lives, but the haunting memories of the house lingered. Nako's nights were restless, plagued by vivid dreams of the house and its dark past. Hiroshi, though outwardly composed, felt an ever-present tension. As if the shadows from the house had followed them back, Nako decided to delve deeper into Ayumi Sato's life. Hoping to find some closure, she visited the local library. Spending hours poring over old records and newspapers, she discovered more about the Sato family's tragic history. The family was once a prominent part of the community, known for their wealth and influence. However, a series of mysterious deaths led to their downfall. Ayumi's descent into madness was well documented, with her paintings becoming increasingly dark and disturbing. Nako felt a strange connection to Ayumi, as if their fates were somehow intertwined. One afternoon, Nako received a call from Hiroshi. His voice was tense, and he asked her to meet him at a cafe near his apartment. When she arrived, she found Hiroshi looking more anxious than she had ever seen him. He revealed that he had been experiencing vivid nightmares and strange occurrences in his apartment. Objects moved on their own, and he often felt a cold presence watching him. They both realized that the house's malevolent influence had not been fully eradicated. Determined to end the haunting once and for all, Nako and Hiroshi decided to consult an expert on the supernatural. They reached out to Professor Ishikawa, a renowned scholar of Japanese folklore and paranormal phenomena. The professor agreed to meet them at his office at the university. When they arrived, they found the professor to be a calm and knowledgeable man in his 60s with a deep interest in their story. After listening to their experiences, Professor Ishikawa explained that such hauntings were often the result of unresolved spiritual conflicts. He suggested that the spirits of the Sato family, particularly Ayumi, were still trapped between worlds, unable to find peace. To truly end the haunting, they would need to perform a purification ritual at the house, guided by an experienced medium. The professor recommended Ms. Fujimoto, a well-respected medium with years of experience dealing with restless spirits. Nako and Hiroshi felt a renewed sense of hope. With the professor's guidance and Ms. Fujimoto's assistance, they believed they could finally lay the spirits to rest. They contacted Ms. Fujimoto, who agreed to help after hearing their story. She sensed the urgency and the danger of the situation and prepared for the ritual with meticulous care. A few days later, they set out for the village once more, this time with the professor and Ms. Fujimoto accompanying them. The journey was tense, filled with an unspoken fear of what awaited them at the house. As they approached the village, a sense of foreboding settled over the group. The house stood as ominously as ever, its windows dark and foreboding. Ms. Fujimoto instructed them to remain calm and follow her lead during the ritual. They entered the house, the atmosphere inside even more oppressive than before. Ms. Fujimoto set up the ritual in the living room, where the presence felt strongest. She placed protective talismans around the room and lit incense to purify the air. As she began the ritual, chanting ancient incantations, the temperature dropped, and the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The house seemed to resist the ritual, its walls groaning and shifting. Nako and Hiroshi stood close to the professor, who offered words of reassurance. Ms. Fujimoto's chants grew louder, her voice steady and commanding. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A cold wind swept through the house, and the whispers turned into anguished wails. The presence grew stronger, and the room shook violently. Ms. Fujimoto remained focused, continuing her chants with unwavering determination. The professor joined in, lending his voice to the ritual. Nako and Hiroshi felt a powerful force trying to break through, but they stood their ground, drawing strength from the others. After what felt like an eternity, the wails subsided, and the room fell silent. The candles reignited on their own, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Ms. Fujimoto concluded the ritual, her face pale but resolute. She explained that the spirits had been appeased, but the house's dark history would always leave a lingering shadow. Nako and Hiroshi felt a sense of relief. Knowing they had done everything possible to bring peace to the restless spirits, they left the house for the final time, hoping to move on with their lives. Back in the village, the old villager, who had first told them about the house, awaited their return. He listened to their tale, nodding with understanding. He revealed that he was a descendant of the Sato family, tasked with watching over the house and ensuring the ritual was performed if needed. Nako and Hiroshi had fulfilled a duty that had been waiting for decades. As they departed the village, they felt a sense of closure. But the experience had changed them. They knew that the memory of the house and its haunting whispers would remain with them forever. They had faced the unknown and survived. But the shadow of the house would always be a part of their lives. The windows to nowhere were now sealed. But the fear and mystery of that night would never truly fade. With their mission complete, they hoped to move on and live their lives, free from the specter of the past. Yet, in the quiet moments, they would always remember the house and the unseen threat that had once nearly claimed them. The months following the ritual were a period of uneasy peace for Nako and Hiroshi. They both tried to resume their normal lives, but the shadow of the house lingered in their minds. Nako continued her photography, capturing the beauty of everyday life. But there was a new depth to her, work, a darkness that seemed to reflect her inner turmoil. Hiroshi, ever the rationalist, threw himself into his job, hoping that work would distract him from the haunting memories. One evening, Nako received a phone call that shattered their fragile peace. It was from the old villager, his voice trembling with urgency. He told her that strange occurrences had started again in the village, and he feared the malevolent force from the house had not been fully eradicated. Nako's heart sank. She knew they had to return and finish what they started. She called Hiroshi, and without hesitation, he agreed to join her. They both understood that this was something they could not ignore. They arrived in the village late at night. The air was thick with tension, and an ominous silence hung over the streets. The old villager met them, his face lined with worry. He led them to the house, which looked even more foreboding than before. The windows were dark, and the air around it seemed colder, as if the house itself was exuding a malevolent aura. Nako and Hiroshi steeled themselves, knowing that this time they would have to confront the evil directly. Inside the house, the atmosphere was suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Nako felt a cold presence watching her, its eyes boring into her soul. Hiroshi, ever the protector, stayed close, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. They made their way to the living room where the ritual had been performed. The candles they had used were still there, now melted down to stubs. Ms. Fujimoto's talismans lay scattered, their power seemingly diminished. Nako and Hiroshi decided to explore the house once more, hoping to find any clue that could help them. As they moved through the darkened rooms, they noticed that the windows, which had previously been blocked, now showed faint glimpses of the garden they had seen in Ayumi's painting. The sight was unsettling, as if the house was trying to lure them into its grasp once again. Nako took a deep breath and pressed on, her resolve strengthening with each step. In one of the upstairs rooms, they found something unexpected, a hidden door behind an old bookshelf. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Nako felt a chill run down her spine, but she knew they had to explore every corner of the house. With Hiroshi leading the way, they descended the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room. The room was filled with old furniture and covered in dust, but in the center stood an altar, surrounded by candles. On the altar was a small, ornate box, the same box that Ayumi had hidden in the house. Nako opened the box, revealing a collection of old photographs and letters. The photographs showed Ayumi and her family, their faces solemn and haunted. The letters were written in Ayumi's elegant but erratic handwriting, detailing her attempts to communicate with the spirits. As they read through the letters, they realized that Ayumi had discovered a way to banish the spirits for good. She had written about a final ritual, one that required a personal sacrifice. Nako's heart pounded as she understood the implications. The ritual they had performed was only a temporary solution. To truly end the haunting, they would need to make a sacrifice. Hiroshi looked at Nako, his eyes filled with determination. They both knew what needed to be done. With the letters as their guide, they set up the ritual in the basement. The air was thick with tension, and the whispers grew louder, as if the spirits were aware of their intentions. Nako lit the candles, her hands trembling slightly. Hiroshi stood beside her, his presence a source of strength. They began the chant, their voices steady and resolute. The room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around them. As they neared the end of the chant, the ground beneath them trembled. The whispers turned into anguished wails, and a powerful force tried to break through. Nako and Hiroshi held their ground, their voices unwavering. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A cold wind swept through the basement, and the presence grew stronger. Nako felt a hand grasp her arm, its grip icy and relentless. In that moment, Hiroshi stepped forward, his face set with determination. He understood that the sacrifice Ayumi had written about was not just a symbolic gesture. It required one of them to stay behind, to act as a conduit for the spirits. Without hesitation, Hiroshi placed his hand on the altar, his voice steady as he continued the chant. Nako tried to stop him, but he shook his head, his eyes filled with resolve. He knew that this was the only way to save them both. The air around them crackled with energy, and the force trying to break through intensified. Nako's heart ached, but she continued the chant, her voice joining Hiroshi's. As the final words were spoken, the ground shook violently, and the wails reached a deafening crescendo. A blinding light filled the room, and Nako felt herself being pulled away, the grip on her arm releasing. When the light faded, she found herself alone in the basement, the candles extinguished and the altar empty. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what had happened. Hiroshi had made the ultimate sacrifice to banish the spirits and protect her. The house was silent, its malevolent presence gone. Nako knew that Hiroshi's sacrifice had been successful, but the pain of losing him was almost unbearable. She made her way back upstairs, her steps heavy with grief. The house, now devoid of its dark power, seemed just an empty shell. As she stepped outside, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The old villager waited for her, his face etched with sorrow. He understood what had transpired and offered words of comfort. Nako knew that she had to carry on to honor Hiroshi's memory and the sacrifice he had made. She returned to the city, her heart heavy but her spirit unbroken. In the months that followed, Nako dedicated herself to her photography. Capturing the beauty and fragility of life, her work took on a new depth, reflecting the profound loss and the strength she had found in the face of darkness. She never forgot Hiroshi or the house that had changed their lives forever. The memory of the windows to nowhere and the haunting whispers remained with her, a reminder of the night they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger. Nako found solace in her art, using it as a way to process her grief and to remember Hiroshi's bravery. She knew that he would always be with her, a guiding presence in her life. The house, now a distant memory, no longer held power over her. She had faced the final confrontation and emerged victorious, her spirit unyielding. The echoes of the past would always be a part of her, but they no longer defined her. Nako moved forward, carrying the lessons she had learned and the strength she had gained. She knew that life was fragile, but it was also filled with beauty and resilience. The darkness they had faced had only made her appreciate the light even more. And as she continued her journey, she felt Hiroshi's presence beside her, a constant reminder of the power of love and sacrifice. The story of the house and its windows to nowhere would remain a part of her, but it was no longer a source of fear. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. Nako had faced the final confrontation and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. And in the quiet moments, she would remember Hiroshi and the sacrifice he had made, knowing that his spirit lived on in her heart.